it's time for a paradigm shift in game design. And the question is, what is a paradigm shift? Well, a paradigm shift is a paradigm is a whole collection of ideas surrounding a theory. The best example you might know of is a graphics library. You've all used graphics libraries, and it has all sorts of methods in it. With a graphics library, you can draw a circle or draw a line or images or rectangles. You can set colors, change the pen, and so forth. You've got all sorts of possibilities. But it's important to realize that with a graphics library, you also have a bunch of concepts that you must understand before you can use the graphics library. For example, you have to know what a circle is in this library. You have to know what pen size means, or what a clipping region is, or the coordinate system. There are all sorts of ideas associated with a graphics library, and you have to learn all of those ideas in order to use the graphics library. Now, just suppose that somebody were to invent a wonderful new graphics paradigm. We'll call it the Fourier transform of fractal representation of 3D objects. Wow, doesn't that sound wonderful? And let's just say that this wonderful new graphics paradigm, it can do things so much better than the old thing. The old thing just does circles and rectangles and squares and images. But this thing, oh, wow, it can do all sorts of wonderful things. This would be revolutionary. Well, shifting from the old graphics library to the new graphics concept, that's a paradigm shift. You have to learn completely new ideas. It's not just learning a few new details or picking up a few extra methods or program routines or whatever. It involves learning a whole new series of concepts associated with it. Now, that can be difficult for many people because, you see, suppose you have spent years mastering the graphics library that you use. It's taken you years to get really good with using it. All of that expertise that you have spent years developing, you're going to have to throw it all away. Instead of being one of the world's greatest experts on the graphics library, you're now nobody. You're a beginner. No different from anybody else. So you're throwing away all of your expertise to go through a paradigm shift. And it should be fairly obvious that most of the experts or professionals or people who really know, they say no thank you when it comes to a paradigm shift. They really would rather not give up all their expertise and go to something new. However, younger people, well, they're a lot more curious and interested, and it really doesn't make any difference to them. They don't have to forget a lot of expertise. For them, both of the paradigms are equally new and difficult. So typically, when you have a paradigm shift, the old people resist it and the young people go with it. However, if that were all there were to it, then it would just be a standoff. There would not be any way to fix it. But what really makes a paradigm shift happen is when people are desperate. When people realize, oh my God, it doesn't work anymore. It's broken. Our paradigm is terrible. We need to fix it. That's when people shift their paradigms. And that's what makes things go. If people are fat and happy, they don't change their paradigm. Even if it's a better paradigm, they're not going to change it because they're too comfortable. So, with those ideas in mind, let's talk about the games paradigm. There are a lot of ideas associated with games, ideas that we take for granted, ideas that we don't even think about them. They're just so natural and obvious to the way that we think about games. One of the most important of these is the idea of a map. Every game has a map in it somewhere, and most players spend most of their time in games moving around from one place to the next. So maps are a fundamental element of the current paradigm for games. Another element that is not universal is violence. A lot of games are violent. Sometimes the violence is really bad, but violence is important. Not all games have violence, but all games have conflict, and the conflict is usually intense conflict, big conflict. Even if it's not directly violent, it can be very intellectually, a lot of intellectual conflict. So all games tend to have very strong conflicts. That's the second thing about the games paradigm. The third thing about the games paradigm is a rather childish attitude towards sex. A lot of games, not all games, but a lot of games have some very, well, it's sort of like a teenager's dreams. Their attitude towards sex is pretty childish. Another factor in many games, not all games, is the use of childish cartoon graphics. That is, the graphics seem to be very much for children. Now, I'm not saying that comic book graphics are for children, because comic books can have some very impressive and serious graphics that we don't see in games. So there is a lot of artistic possibility here that is not being used. That's the games paradigm. At least those are the major elements of the games paradigm. Now it's time for us to change, to jump to a new line of thinking. I'd like to talk about candy. Candy is fun food. Candy makes your mouth jump up and say, "Oh, wow, that's wonderful, I love it." Candy is intense. There's nothing subtle about candy. Its taste is loud and bright and powerful. But you know, candy is only a small part of a vast universe of cuisine, of food. There are all kinds of different foods out there that you can eat, and we all try many different kinds of food. And candy is just one small part of that big universe. Okay, now let's talk about comic books. Comic books are fun literature. Comic books, I mean, there's nothing subtle about comic books. They have big, bright colors and simple drawings, and the plots in comic books are always very simple. The good guys are good, 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 and the bad guys are bad, bad, bad. And in comic books, there's always a happy ending where the good guy beats the bad guy and the good guy gets the girl. Very simple stuff. But you know, comic books are only a small part of a huge universe of literature. There are magazines and romance novels and newspapers and old classics and textbooks and all kinds of different literature out there. And comic books are one part of it. In fact, a rather small part of it. Okay, let's talk about cartoons now. Cartoons are fun literature. Cartoons, well, they have bright colors and simple plots. They're really easy to understand. And the good guys always defeat the bad guys and they get the girl. There's nothing subtle about cartoons. They're very simple and pure and obvious. But, cartoons are only a small part of a huge universe of video. There's all kinds of different video that we can watch. Sports and news and politics and movies and all kinds of different things. And cartoons are only one small part of that huge, huge universe. Now let's talk about games. Games are fun. I mean, that's the whole idea. A game is supposed to be fun. If a game isn't fun, well, who wants to play it? And games tend to be very intense, very simple. There's nothing subtle about games. The conflict is very intense. But, there aren't any games at all like, there are no romance games. There are no games at all like these movies. They're just, these are we just don't have this. And the sad thing is, when they do make a game out of a movie, the game is really bad compared to the movie. It's embarrassing how bad the game might be. And so games are a tiny part of a huge universe that's empty. There's nothing else in this universe. It's not like candy or comic books or cartoons. Games are all alone, and that's the problem. Now, we all know, and because they're all alone, we all know who plays games. Young men. If you talk about, the wide variety of people, they aren't there. For example, here's a photograph from the Game Developers Conference. And I went through the expanded version of this photograph. I looked at it in detail. And I put a red circle around every woman in the picture. There aren't many women, are there? And in fact, most of the men are fairly young. So games are primarily for young men. Now, they are not for everybody. Games only appeal to a small slice of the public. Now, I'm sure you've heard all the statistics. Everybody plays games. And that's just not true. The real question is not who plays games, but who pays money for games. Who does that? Do you think this lady pays money for games? How much money do you think this man spends on games? Or how about this lady? Do you think she spends a lot of money on games? Or this guy here? How much money do you think he spends on games? How much time do you think he spends playing games? This lady, you think she spends a lot of money on games? No. The fact is, we know most people don't play games. So, games have failed to become a mass medium. In that sense, they're a failure. They're making a lot of money, that's true, but they have not become a mass medium like cinema or literature or food. They don't appeal to everybody, and that is a very bad problem. That is what I think will drive the paradigm shift as people begin to realize the games are broken, that they don't do enough. Now, there are the indie games people, and they are trying hard to break out of the rut that games are in, but after some years now, the indie games people really haven't solved the problem. The games are still pretty much the same as the same old games we've been playing for decades. So what are we going to do? How are we going to fix this? Can we fix it? Well, to answer that question, I'd like to point out that a paradigm shift is really a revolution. And every revolution has some central idea, a slogan perhaps, that summarizes what the revolution is about. The obvious example is the French Revolution, which had the simple slogan, liberty, equality, fraternity. That was the slogan for the French Revolution. This is Nicholas Copernicus. He created the Copernican Revolution, in which the Earth, he said, the Earth is not the center of the universe, the sun is the center of the solar system. The central idea of his revolution, we are not the center of the universe. And that was a big change. Charles Darwin, with the theory of evolution, he made a huge revolution. His slogan was, we aren't really any different from animals. So now I can give you my slogan. People, not things. That's the slogan for the paradigm shift in game design.